Hey everybody, this is Tracy here with another edition of A View from Tracy's Point, and we are here with a video. Jennifer Bonjean has filed a motion ahead of jury selection, which begins tomorrow in the United States versus Robert Sylvester Kelly in the Northern District of Illinois. And she wants to preclude anybody who has seen any portion of the docu-lies that we know as surviving lies, but other people refer to as surviving you know who. So hold tight, I'll be right back. So you guys, I shared with you that Jennifer Bonjean had posted on Twitter the other day that jury selection is going to begin tomorrow, and the trial, I believe, is supposed to start on the 15th or the 16th. It should only take a couple of days to see the jury. And in my previous video where I talked about jury selection, the judge, he basically said how the process was going to run. And he said that there were already 100 people who said that they could sit through a 4-week trial. They were really going to try and pick the jury from like the first 50 people or 35 to 50 people. It was like a small number. So they're going to rush through this jury selection process. But now that Jennifer Bonjean has filed this motion, it will be interesting to see what the judge says, because that may slow down the process. And maybe that's something that they should have asked the people on the questionnaire, which they could have asked the people. I didn't see the questionnaire that they sent out to the jurors, like in the Northern District of Illinois. They did post the actual questionnaire. But in any event, let's go ahead and jump into this motion. Oh, and I do think it's fair that she asks that question to find out, because you want to weed out these people who've already watched that mess, thinking that it was actually vetted and that these people were actually telling the truth. I don't think people understand that with these little fake documentaries that are coming out every other day, they're just basically letting people get up there and say whatever they want to say without any proof of what they're saying. And we know with Dr. Phil and a couple of the other major networks, when these women were on their little publicity tour, there were actual talk shows and news stations, reputable news stations, that were like, no, we can't run with this because we don't know if these people are telling the truth. We can't verify these stories. So kudos for Jennifer Bonjean for at least trying to stop these people from being seated on the jury. So it says, now comes Robert S. Kelly, defendant, by and through his counsel, Jennifer Bonjean, and respectfully files this motion to excuse all potential jurors who have watched any portion of the docuseries where the docuseries 1 explores the exact allegations that underscore this indictment, including Kelly's 2008 prosecution for CP of Rishona Landfair. 2 includes extensive interviews with several individuals expected to testify at this trial, and 3 contains numerous allegations of other misconduct that is not and will not be introduced during this trial. Any potential juror who has watched any portion of this docuseries must be disqualified for cause, irrespective of whether he or she believes he or she can be fair, where too great a risk exists, and such a juror would base his or her verdict on matters not introduced into evidence in the court. And then there's a note at the bottom. It says, for the purpose of this motion, we seek to incorporate the Surviving Lies docuseries, which can be streamed on Netflix, And that might have been from another motion where somebody indicated, where the prosecution, I guess, indicated. No, it says Kelly seeks to incorporate. I don't know. Anyway, number one, Surviving Lies is a Lifetime documentary detailing abuse allegations by numerous women against the defendant. It aired in January 2019 and was Lifetime's highest rated program in 2 years. In January 2020, a second season premiered on Lifetime titled Surviving More Lies, The Reckoning. And then Surviving Lies is largely credited as the impetus for the wave of criminal charges that followed its premiere. 2. The docu-series devotes significant attention, indeed entire episodes, to the subject matter of this trial. For example, episode 3 is titled Sex Tape Scandal, which explores the sex tape that was the subject of Kelly's 2008 prosecution. Relatedly, episode 4 is titled The People vs. R. Kelly, which addresses the 2008 prosecution and allegations related to the first 8 counts of the superseding indictment. 3. Indeed, the docuseries contains extensive interviews with some of the government's witnesses in this case, including Lisa Van Allen and Geronda Pace. Other individuals who appear in this docuseries are identified as potential witnesses in this matter, including Stephanie Sparkle Edwards and Andrea Kelly. There is substantial overlap between the subject matter of this prosecution and the subject matter of the documentary. So let's go back up here to Geronda Pace, which I am still trying to figure out. So I guess it all comes full circle since we now know that it was Jim DeRogatis' daughter-in-law. I think they came out in one of the motions. People were saying that it was his ex-wife that took all those pictures of Geronda, but in one of the other motions, it was either the daughter-in-law or the sister-in-law. It wasn't his wife that took those pictures. So I'm sure they're going to bring up those pictures, ask her about, I guess, stuff that was in the trial, and then how she finagled her way into Mr. Kelly's house a year later. Child, just a mess. But it would be interesting to see what the little heifer has to say. They'll, give her other 15 minutes of fame in the spotlight. But, in the long run, things aren't going to work out well for Geronda Pace, because you just can't do the stuff that she's doing and think that you can get away with it. Okay, wait a second here. What happened to my document? Okay. Then let's go down here. And doesn't it kind of like make you feel like it was all a setup from the start, that they knew that down the road that they were going to do this? I bet Jim DeRogatis probably stayed in contact with Geronda ever since that case. Geronda was probably I'm sure her and Jim DeRogatis just been chit-chatting through the years, plotting and scheming. And I hope Jennifer Bonjean has that post that Geronda made where she said that the story that Jim DeRogatis put in his book was a whole lie. Okay, and hopefully she will rip her to shreds when she gets her butt little lying, conniving behind up there on that witness stand. Let's see. And then it says 4. Furthermore, Surviving Lies contains hours of interviews with individuals who share a litany of other allegations of misconduct against Kelly, including some allegations that the government has already conceded it will not introduce at trial. Just by way of example, the docu-lies discusses allegations against Kelly in connection with his relationship with Aaliyah when she was underage. In response to Kelly's motion in limine, the government has already conceded that it will not introduce evidence related to allegations surrounding his relationship with the singer. This court acknowledged the government's concession, finding Kelly's motion moot in light of the government's position in this issue. Any juror who watched the docu-lies would be privy to such information that has already been excluded at this trial. 5. In light of the foregoing, there is no scenario under which any individual who watched Surviving Lies could be qualified as a juror in this case, whether the person admits it or not. Any person who has seen the docu-lies would possess information about the allegations in this indictment and unrelated allegations that would unquestionably interfere with his or her ability to decide the case based on the evidence that is introduced at trial. No one, even a well-intentioned person, would be capable of purging his brain of information obtained through the docu-lies or separating information learned from the docu-lies that was never subject to cross-examination from testimony introduced at trial on the same subject matter. 6. The Sixth Amendment provides that in all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to a trial by an impartial jury. United States Constitution Amendment 6. One touchstone of a fair trial is an impartial trier of fact, a jury capable and willing to decide the case solely on the evidence before it. McDonald Power Equipment versus Greenwood, which was a case that was heard in 1984. A juror is not impartial if his experiences, opinions, predispositions, biases, prejudices, interests, or relationships would interfere or subsequently impair the performance of his duties as a juror in accordance with the instructions and his oath. And that came from a case, Wainwright versus Witt from 1985. 7. Not only must potential jurors with actual bias be excused for cause, but courts have found that when circumstances create too great a risk of affecting a juror's decision, affecting a juror's decision-making process, even if the juror is not consciously fully aware of the impact, a jury must be excused. And that's from Crawford versus United States, a case from 1909, holding that the law says that with regard to some of the relations which may exist between the juror and one of the parties, bias is implied. The evidence of its actual existence need not be given. And then they say, see also Smith versus Phillips, which was a case heard in 1982. O'Connor concurring, and this may went to the Supreme Court. It says determining whether a juror is biased or has prejudged a case is difficult, partly because the juror may have an interest in concealing his own bias, and partly because the juror may be unaware of it. See also Hunley versus Gudinez, and that was a case heard in the Seventh Circuit in 1992. Recognizing presumed bias in extreme situations where, for example, the prospective juror is connected to the litigation in such a way that is highly unlikely that he or she could act impartially during deliberations. 8. This type of bias is called implied or presumed bias and is determined as a matter of law and attributed to a prospective juror regardless of actual partiality. Jurors are considered impartial so long as they can conscientiously and properly carry out their sworn duty to apply the law to the facts of a particular case. Ross versus Oklahoma from 1988. A request to excuse a juror for cause must be supported by specific causes or reasons that demonstrate that a matter of law the juror is not qualified to serve, and that was Gray versus Mississippi from 1987. And in certain circumstances, juror bias will be presumed and the juror must be excluded. For example, where the jury is related to one of the parties or has a financial interest in the outcome of the case. United States versus Policimi from the Seventh Circuit in 2000. And then number 9, in this case, a potential juror who has seen any portion of Surviving Lies is actually prejudiced where there is simply no scenario under which an individual exposed to the contents of surviving lies can be impartial. Some potential jurors in this case who have completed the questionnaires acknowledge as much, but some potential jurors who have seen the documentary have indicated that they are still capable of being impartial. This representation, in a word, is absurd. 10. The case presents one of those rare circumstances where bias must be presumed by individuals who have seen surviving lies, because the viewer has already gained an understanding of the specific facts in this case through television interviews with actual witnesses. Even the best-intentioned individual would invariably view a witness's testimony from the witness stand through a lens of whatever bias he/she developed after watching that same individual provide her account during television interview. 11. Now, actually, let's go back up to number 10. Now, we'd be interested if somebody was on that jury and watched Surviving Lies, and then one of the people got up there and testified and told a totally different story. And then you'd be sitting there like, that ain't what she said on that show. So is she telling the truth now? Is she telling the truth then? And she just lying both times. So it could work in his favor to have, one person up there who remembers it or has watched it and can tell if these heifers telling lies. But then again, they probably made them watch it so many times since then to remember the lies that they told when they were on it, that, to try and keep it straight. So anyway, 11. To be clear, this is not a simple matter of a jury being exposed to negative pretrial publicity. Indeed, every prospective juror in this case has probably been exposed to some negative pretrial publicity about Kelly. Rather, this is an issue of potential jurors possessing a mountain of information about the specific allegations in this case and the witnesses' stories that were placed center stage at this trial and may or may not be admissible. Allowing an individual to sit on the jury who has seen surviving lies is no different than allowing a juror to sit on the jury who was permitted to preview the discovery in this case. 12. In the conventional criminal case in which the jury is asked only whether guilt has been proven beyond a reasonable doubt, the bias or prejudice of even single jury, I think she means even a single juror, would violate the defendant's right to a free trial. 13. Thus, this court should excuse for cause all potential jurors who have seen any portion of surviving lies, and those potential jurors who have been exposed to pretrial publicity about this case must be scrutinized and questioned to determine whether they are capable of serving as an impartial witness. And then there is a note at the bottom. It says, just by way of example, the following clip is a portion of extensive interviews from Surviving Lies with one of the state's star witnesses, Lisa Van Allen. And then they have a link to a YouTube video, and it says, it is difficult to imagine that any juror would be equipped to listen to Van Allen's trial testimony with an impartial viewpoint and without allowing prior information received during the docu-lies shade her assessment of Van Allen's in-court testimony. This is precisely the scenario the law prohibits. Respectfully submitted, Jennifer Bonjean of the Bonjean Law Group. So what do you guys think? Is the judge going to agree or is he going to disagree? I think he should agree. Like, it would just be ridiculous to have people sitting on that jury who has seen that garbage, and they're going to bring it into the courtroom, and then when they get ready to deliberate, they're going to bring it into the deliberation room and talk about what they saw. What they saw on that series probably will encourage the other jurors to go home and pull it up and watch it, right? And say, just get a good idea, child. Just go watch that and you'll know he's guilty. That kind of shenanigans would be taking place. So that's it. Leave your comments below, rate the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And until the next time, I shall talk to you guys later. Bye bye.